do some cool stuff today. So,
Here you go.
thank you. I just took a Valium. It's been an interesting day so far. I'm currently involved in a food war with my youngest son. I noticed that he was eating all of my favorite foods before I got a chance to. So I made the comment that he was my food nemesis. And then I think I fired the first shot. No, he did. There were some microwave burritos in the freezer. We eat real healthy around here. So there was some microwave burritos in the freezer, and I knew they were there, and I was going to have some, and when I went to go get some, there was a note that said, no, you get none. No burritos for you. That was the first shot, and so I retaliated with, what did I do?
Was it the ABC 123s or
No,
something else?
it was something else. Anyway, I hid something that he was going to want to eat. And then, he hid my Metamucil in the morning. And then the other day I grabbed, he likes the ABC 123s from Chef Boyardee. Like I said, we eat real healthy around here. He had 3 cans. I hid them all with hints as to where they were. So today when I woke up, there were notes all over the place saying, not your toy anymore. My toy now. I ended up finding out that it was a Yeti, and he had hidden it in with his Legos. So now I have to retaliate, and he attacked my Yeti, which is like, that's not okay. So my retaliation has to be pretty stiff. I have to drop the hammer. I haven't figured out what I'm going to do yet. If you have any ideas, link them in the comments. Okay, so I'm going to show you a picture of my desk right now. Okay, so that is my desk today. You'll notice a different knife, but we're not going to talk about that. I want to talk about this right here. It is a, I don't even know how to pronounce that. It's kind of chocolate. We bought it when we went to Michael's to buy some yarn for a quilt we were going to make. It was like up at the cash register, just like a quarter. And I got it, and I decided that I wasn't going to eat it until I had edited all of the books that I was going to be releasing for the next 3 years. They're short books, and I've been editing them one at a time. I decided I was not going to eat that until it was done. I have one more to edit, and then after I'm done with that, I will enjoy my chocolate. So there's that. I've got this little skeleton hand. It's retractable, and it is used to scratch my back. We found it at this store called Just For Him, and we go there a lot. They have a humidor room where you can buy all kinds of different cigars for all kinds of different prices. They have a smoking lounge for cigars and pipes. I've never spent much time in there. The smoke is intolerable to me. I got a couple hats there. And they have just a bunch of stuff that pretty much only interests men. I have seen women shopping in there, and they have women that work there. I remember when the first lockdown happened, during the very beginning of the quarantine, I wanted to get a cigar, so I went out there, and they weren't letting anybody in the store, But a woman met me at the door, and she asked what I wanted. I wanted a cigar around this particular price range, and she asked me a couple of questions, and then she went and she got one I'd never tried before, and it was great. So I've seen women smoking cigars in there. I'm not saying women don't hang out at this place. I'm just saying it's a store geared for men. I like to take my sons in there. It's where we get our shaving brushes and our shaving cups and that kind of thing. Aftershave, that kind of thing. It's a very cool store. So that's where I got that. And the other thing I wanted to show you today was this. There's a ruler, 6 inches and 15 centimeters. I use it because I buy a lot of things like rings off of Amazon. I'm really into rings. You can't tell because I'm not wearing one, but you have seen me wearing them before. And they have like this ring is this many millimeters thick and this many, and I always use that to kind of see what I'm getting into. There's been a lot of other times when I've needed it. Always makes me feel like a elementary school kid whenever I pull out my ruler and do something with my ruler at my desk. Makes me feel like I need a protractor and one of those little pokey compass things. But as much as I'd love to get those things for my desk, I haven't come up with a need for a protractor while writing a fantasy novel. If you can think of a reason why, I would love to hear it because I'd love to buy one. So just link it in the comments. Not link it in the comments. Tell me in the comments why a fantasy writer needs a protractor. That would really help me out. Okay, so in the last video, you saw a small clip of this section of my office, and you saw 2 comfortable chairs there, and a table. Table have a bunch of interesting things, which we I will at one point take a video of and show you the stuff that you can find on my table. My bass is in that shop. I think it's beautiful. It's kind of like my dream bass. It's an acoustic bass. It also plugs into an amp, and so that's really cool. It has a completely different sound than you would get from a regular electric amp bass when plugged into an amp. It's fantastic. So I used to have a fairly uncomfortable chair in here, and so a friend of mine who I call Kraken didn't have a place to sit. Whenever we got together, me and 2 other guys got together to when me and him and some other guy got together to talk every Friday night about art and fantasy and stuff like that. So I went to a flea market with the express purpose of buying this guy a chair. When I found that I liked it, I grabbed him and brought him to the flea market and let him sit in it and tell me if he liked it. And he was happy with it, so I bought it. Brought it in here. Bragged about how I bought the chair for him and all this kind of stuff. And then the other guy demanded that he be allowed to sit in the chair because it was more comfortable for his neck, which is bullshit. It's not a good neck chair. But that guy was kind of an asshole anyway. So we just let it go. And I got a second chair, more comfortable recliner chair. And then as soon as that guy came back, he realized that the recliner was better for his neck, so he got the new chair. Anyway, he's gone. He's out of my life now. I'm better for it. But when Kraken does come in my office, he gets to sit in his chair. Okay, so that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about from what you saw in the last video. There is a thing I'm doing. This is my 8th episode. My seasons are 13 episodes long, so I'm preparing for next season's song. The intro song that you hear, the bass line that you hear, coming in and out of these videos. That bass line was written by me, and I want to do a different bass intro and outro for all of my seasons. So I wrote next season's song, and I'm learning it. I might have to add more to it. I don't know if it's long enough. But I did want to give you a small preview of what that will look like. So here we go. This is a small little tidbit of next season's intro outro. That was it. So that's a little bit. It's in the middle towards the end. But that's part of what I'm writing. Okay. I got some really cool stuff going on. We're going to talk about the Sour Eye again. A couple of episodes back, I told you about a war that was going on called The Silent War of the Sour Eye. And it's a collection of short stories about these two time-traveling wizard warrior men who one is trying to use his time-traveling ability to push this into happening, kill this person in a vital time, and all this kind of stuff to destroy the world. And the other one is trying to fight him on that. So that first story that I read before was called The Slave. If you want to go and catch up before we move on, go back to, I don't remember what episode it was, but go back to the episode and read The Slave. And watch that episode. It'll give you a little bit more information on what we're going to be looking at. This story I wrote in 2004. I didn't know about the time-traveling wizards at the time. There was just something weird that was happening with this story. And it turns out I didn't find out about the time-traveling wizard thing until 2019. Maybe 2020. It was late 2019 at the very earliest. So 15 years later, I found out what the story meant that I had written in 2004. It's one of those weird things that happens with me. Some people say, my wife, and sometimes I agree, that the whole thing's already up here, and that I'm just tapping into it and writing it. There's even a theory, a wilder theory, that says that this world that I write in actually exists somewhere, and I'm the only prophet of that world. A more down-to-earth theory would be that I wrote it in 2004, and my subconscious has been trying to make sense of it ever since, and has been putting things in place and writing stories and stuff to try to work out that problem. So adopt any theory you want. Adopt the theory that I'm lying, and that I had the whole thing planned from the very beginning. That might be a thing too. We don't know. Nobody knows for sure why these things happen and why they worked for me. But I'm going to read it. This particular story you can find in a couple of places. One place is in my short story collection that I released in 2016 called Legends of Paralesque. The other place you can find it is in a short story compilation that I was in with a bunch of other very talented writers. And it is called Blackest Spells. It can be found there too. Either way, I'm going to read it to you today. We're going to go through it, we're going to read it, and then I'm going to explain what it means and the different things that are happening in it, and make sure that you don't miss the little stuff. Some of it, a normal reader, an average reader would be able to pick up. Some of it, even more, a very astute reader would be able to pick up. But there's one thing in there that only an insane reader would be able to pick up. So we're going to talk about all of it. I'm going to explain it all to you. And we'll go from there. Okay, I got to find it, and then I'll be right back with you. Hey, I'm back. I would like to say, like I did in the first take of this reading, I'd like to say that I found it right away. But what I found in the first take was a rough draft. I had to go elsewhere to find a perfect draft of this. But anyway, here we are. And this piece is called The Banshee. Originally, when I wrote it, it was called Voice of Death. Banshee is a much better name for it. So, here we go. The Banshee. 24 years before the escape. I took my hat off and ran my hand across the slick, sweaty skin of my bald pate. I fought not to gag, and I fought not to laugh. From atop the cliff, I could see the entire farming village, or what was left of it. The houses had burned to the ground. Survivors tried to clean the bodies from the town proper. They were all dead. 1,000 men, if you could call them that, completely eradicated by one man, as I could see here. Laughing was poor play. My friend had suffered terribly for this victory, if he was even alive at all. But as I looked down at Harask's ragged battalion and their rotting corpses, I remembered the things that Harask had promised he would do with all his men and all his power. The horror the warlord had boasted would follow his march, and I smiled. A murder of crows, 100 strong, hung fat and greedy in the air above the town. As I made my way through the bodies, every crow I passed squawked and screamed at me. Men and women, drenched in blood to their elbows and knees, hefted one body after the next to the wagons and drove them out of the city. This was hard, bitter work, with no sign of complaint or grumble. Every citizen here was grateful to be alive. The children did not run and play. They carried buckets of water and dippers to the workers. They beat the crows back and watched the scene in horror. All save one, a beautiful, soot-smeared blonde girl I knew as LaDonna, stood in the burned-out shell of a house, staring at the char in wonder. I stopped near a water-bearing boy and smiled down at him. "Water for a thirsty traveler?" I asked. The boy looked up and smiled. He took the battered dipper out of his bucket and he held it out. The water was cool and sweet. I nodded to the boy and smiled. "You're Thrak, aren't you?" "How do you know my name, sir?" "You have a brother, is that correct? And a sister?" "I do. A ma that loves me and a pa I haven't seen in a while," the boy said. His accent was thick but refreshing. These were good people. I knew exactly where this young man's father was, but there was no mercy in telling him. "Well, then I guess you're sad, aren't you?" I said. "Sounds like a lot of people that love you, young man. Can you see me to the church?" "Hecatomb's church?" the boy said. "Is there another one?" "There's one in the woods being built. The man building it says it's there to house wonders," Thrak said. "He's not to be trusted. You stay away from that building." I do not mean that one. I mean, I am for Father Hecatomb's place." "I'll show you," the boy said. He turned and I followed. When we reached the church, we found a few low-ranking warriors of Hecatomb standing guard at the door. Not from this village. They had been called in from Wraith. One of them stepped forward and shook his head. "Church is closed, stranger. I'm sorry. We're in mourning. I cannot allow you to enter." "I am expected." One nod guarded and the other walked into the church. The door opened. The idol in front of the room was modest and wrong. The face was too thin, the nose too large. The man who had crafted the statue obviously loved the god, but he'd never seen him. However, two marks could not be missed: the lack of the legs and the missing eye. The candles burned slow and few, cloaking the room in shadows. A man laid atop the altar. A man in black lay atop the altar. I spoke a word in prayer and the priest met me. "Welcome to my chapel, Bard. We were told you could answer a few questions for us." "I'm sure I can. May I see him?" The priest ushered me forward. I stopped at the altar, stared down at my friend, and held back tears. Kai's ruptured throat was swollen like a black pumpkin, larger around than a man's head, and his skin had split in many places. I placed a thumb on the eyelid and opened it gently. The whites of the eyes were blood red. Every vein had burst. Looking at the ruin of a mouth, I could not tell which scraps of flesh had been lips and which were gums. The teeth were gone, every one, and the mouth trickled blood slowly. Tell me what happened. Tell me everything you know. The priest kneaded his hands together and nodded. He drew me over to a pew, his words less than a whisper. A few weeks ago, a rider came through this place. He was frantic and terrified. He asked for water and food, and we gave. He warned of an army of monsters headed this way, and begged us to run for our lives. We were able to ask very few questions before he was back on his horse riding to warn others. We went to our Lord. We told him what we had heard, and begged for his help, but he would not waste his resources on the word of one man who hadn't even stayed to be questioned. He told us he had no knowledge of this army, and he sent us away. When we demanded more, he drew a whip, and we ran for our lives. We sent our own men in the direction of the warning, but in but a few days we had confirmation this horde was bearing down upon us, and we were doomed. Why they were coming for us, I couldn't tell you. We have nothing, no treasures save our people, and nothing to steal except the crop of corn and soy. We held meetings to discuss our future, and came up with two options. We could gather what arms we had and fight, or we could hide in the forest in the caves. It was our best option, but if we wanted us to find us, and were willing to search for a small time, we could not escape them. Then he showed up. He rode a gray stallion, a magnificent beast we had never seen an equal to. He wore robes of black that flowed when he walked, and a sword with a crystal blade. His hair was black, his skin pale. He walked into our town hall, and we followed him in. He pulled out a scroll and a quill and wrote this letter. Your village will be destroyed. An army comes for a treasure you do not even know you have. Its master will take it and defeat the world with it. I'm here to help. Gather your things and hide. Take your families and what food you can grab and flee. Go into the forest, go into the caves, hide, and leave this army to me. We asked him more questions, but he would not answer. He went into the woods and came back with a large branch. As we packed, he crafted a bow. Not a hunting bow like we have here in town, but a war bow. Too large for any fair aim, and too heavy to run with. He carved 2 enormous arrows, only 2, and wrote another note asking for arrowheads. Some in our number did not want to give this man control of our town. Many of our people thought him part of the army itself, here to trick us out of a fight, but the rest of us knew. We knew the only hope we had was the man in black, and we obeyed. The last we saw of him, he was standing on the peak of this building, looking west in the direction of the army, and praying. 2 days went by. We had not run out of food, but the army had never come looking for us. We sent out scouts, and the tales they brought back led us here, to this slaughter. We found the bodies as they are. No wounds except head wounds, all their heads ruptured, and their bodies contorted in the forms of terrible pain. Every one of them was dead. In the very center, as if a drop of death had been contaminated an entire pool of people, he laid out exactly like this. We stared down at him and wept. Then he thanked him and prayed over him, in the name of Hecatomb for his sacrifice. We were going to give him a hero's funeral before little Ithrin cried out that he was still alive. Imagine our horror. There was much talk of taking his life, of ending his suffering. This is no way for a man to exist. I prayed about it, asked Hecatomb what I might do. I was told you would come, and that you would tell us what to do and explain what happened. I've been waiting for you to make any sense of this for me. His name is Kai, I answered. He once had another name, but it is set aside. It is for another life, a life taken from him, a life he can never have back. He was at one time a Tremerian knight. If we ran a hand along his forehead, you would find a third eye hidden in the flesh of his head, though his kind is not well liked among your people. My story is from eons ago, a time when a child needed a hero, and Kai came to his cry. Kai hit the ground outside of the Reese wasteland with the slamming of lightning and a showering of stone. His white robes billowed out around him, tossed in a flurry by the terrible wind of the storm. The ground hissed and popped as it let out its noxious fog. Kai did not tarry to allow its work on his body. He pulled his sword from his hip and strode to the tower. Black smeared stone, stained green and yellow from the smog at its base, it looked as if the structure had been built on infection and rot. The sharp, pale spires that rose from its peaks were carved from the body of a fallen god. The building, an epicenter of hate, stood a stain on every land save this one. It was the hub of a diabolical coven tolerated nowhere but here. The Reese Wasteland was home to foul beasts and no other races. The creatures that walked this land were monsters, more akin to insects than any animal, and the dark-hearted as the land they crawled upon. Kai called on the power of his blade, and with the singing of a song, he slid it into the side of the stone building. He slid the blade into the hilt, slicing a perfect circle in the tower. He grabbed the stones, and with a wrench of his might, ripped the wall free and stepped inside. The Brachian Coven had found, after much seeking, the last of the Terrican bloodline. They had bound the last of the immortal seers, and were even then sitting to make a meal of him. This boy had the power of first sight, the ability to see an outcome before it happens, to see the end of a struggle before it begins. They had gone to much trouble to find the boy. Now that he was in their clutches, they could become the most powerful force in the known world. Kai walked straight to their dining hall, and while they toasted the meal laid out before them, Kai slowly chose his song. He sang of a lyric smith, a mage who learned a song for every spell. He looked at the boy in the eyes and he smiled. The boy lay naked on a table before the coven. They each had a long, thin blade and were preparing to devour him alive. He whimpered when he saw Kai, and the table looked up. Kai lifted his song high and deadly in the air, and his sword dance began. The spells of the coven were mighty and terrible, and they brought their magic to bear as Kai leapt upon the table and crouched over the lad. He touched the boy's chest so no spell could strike him. He sang and moved among them. Blood followed every verse and every swing. The Tremerian knight knew few rivals. Within moments, the entire coven had either died or fled. He laid a kiss on the boy's forehead and encased the lad with a shivering, impregnable globe. Kai promised he would return and rushed after Sister Killian, the most powerful of the order. He found her in the upper reaches of the tower, in a room enchanted with darkness. Kai entered, glowing white and unafraid. He stepped into the middle of the room and found death all around him. Sister Killian, one of the dread witches of Deem, had grown up to the cemetery nation of Ilu. Death was hers to command. Bones rattled around Kai, rotting flesh, and gasping undead at every turn. Necromancers were evil almost exclusively, and Kai had not known he would face one that day. He chose a song and began to sing, and the death stepped out to greet him. With every sweep of his sword and every word of his song, he dropped them all to steaming parts of unlife. He sang his mightiest spell, and the darkness in the room shattered. The woman before him, dressed in black spiderweb lace, carried a silver goblet. The Chimerians sent a singer to us. We know now they fear our coven and my order. Kai had nothing to say. He knew no pride, no reason to defend the bravery of his order. He shook his head. I came for the boy. You have him. Nothing can stop you from taking him now. She took a long drink of her goblet. When she pulled away, a dark fog climbed out of the glass to cling to her face. As it moved across her features, Kai saw her skull and her jawbone and her spine, all through the skin of her face and throat. She grinned and he stepped closer. I came for the boy, but I will have you too. Sister Killian is too corrupt, too vile to allow to live when I have her under my blade. She dipped her pinky in the goblet and smiled as she licked it. Have you heard of the Banshee? Kai desired to kill her then, but he held back, allowing for any information he might get. He wanted the witches of Deem eradicated. If she was about to give a clue to their mysteries, he would give her a chance to spill it. It's a terrible story, the Banshee. A woman of noble birth who dies after losing a loved one. A poor soul cannot rest. She roams the land of the estate, bemoaning her loss. She will, for generations to come, scream when she hears of the death of another in her family. Her scream is too terrible to hear, and all that hear and lay ear to it die a painful death. To hear the Banshee is to know her loss, and to perish in its knowledge. This I already knew, Kai said. The tales of the dead are known to my people. The fate of the Banshee is an ill one for sure. But why talk of this in the hour of your death? It is not the hour of my death, Kai. It is the moment. She stepped forward and tossed the contents in the goblet into his face. The black ichor gripped his face and held. It slid its way up his neck and across his lips. The liquid death sought his nose and his mouth, and he choked and he coughed. He opened his mouth to sing, but loosed such a hideous racket as to soil a soul. He fought to speak, but only a scream would come. His voice poured out into the air, and the Witch of Dean before him dropped to the ground, her head breaking open as she wept. Kai killed every one of those men, women, and other creatures out there in your village with the sound of his voice. His people tried every spell they could. They sought to write the spells that might free him of the Banshee's voice. But he will carry it around with him until the end of his life. He will kill anyone who hears his voice, as he killed the enemies of your village. The priest looked at me, then back to Kai. How do we help him? No magic or God can heal him. He must pull through. If he is to live, by himself and his own strength, starve him. Any food will be his death. Give him tiny sips of water, but do not pour it down his throat. He will drown. But before all else, you must whisper. Whisper the names of every man, woman, and child he saved. Remind him how much you love him, because right now, Kai is wishing for death. He knows one day this curse will take his life. He desires that death, an end to all his suffering. Remind him he is loved and needed, and Kai might come back to us. Tell him I came to see him. Tell him I said he did a fine job. Okay, so that was the reading of the Banshee. So there's a couple of things. One, Harask. He was the villain from The Slave. The one with the green eye. He raises an army and starts going around and killing important people. So the village itself is important because the kid Thrak lives there. And Thrak becomes one of the founders of the Calden Collective. You can see the Calden Collective being created in the book Plight of Madness and Fate of Madness. Calden Collective is very important. You can see them after they've been created in the book Crown, the Manhunters. And the Calden Collective just remains to be important. It is one of the reasons for the first act. The first act talks about it is me. The whole thing, if you line it all up, it's all about leadership. I'm trying to figure out the things that make a great leader and the qualities of a great leader. And so I wrote 28 books to figure it out. Of course, there's a lot of other things. We've talked about some of the other themes. Leadership is one of them. So I was creating leaders. I was creating heroes. I was creating orders and armies and things like this in the first act. And I was setting everything up, and that's what I'm releasing now. I'm setting everything up for the second and third act. Basically, the war that destroys the world and the post-apocalyptic. I'm setting all of those up, and the Decoding Collective is extremely important to that. So if Thrax's there, then when he talks about his brother, and his brother is Ithrin, and you end up talking to Ithrin, and Ithrin talks about his brother, and he talks about his sister. Ithrin is also in the Decoding Collective. His sister is the little blonde girl that's walking around the burnt out building, and she's looking at all the char and all of this of the burnt out building. Her name is LaDonna, and she becomes known as LaDonna Seething. She becomes a great pyromancer or a fire mage, and she ends up in a prison in a town called Banshee in the book Onslaught, and she's been there for so long. She's completely decayed. She's bitten off her tongue. She's lost all of her hair. She's blind. That's how long she's been there. And she ends up falling in love, and Aaron the Mark ends up falling in love with her. Later in the book Wrath, she's died and she's gone to the afterlife. He meets up with her in the afterlife. The remainder of LaDonna and Aaron's love story is told out as Aaron continues to live and LaDonna is in the afterlife dead. He tries his best to remain as true to her as he possibly can, forsaking all women except one, even though she's dead and he could never be with her. The rest of their love story plays out in the second act. LaDonna is a lot of fun. I get to play a lot with her in the Mountain series, where she has, where she helps in a war. But we've got a very beautiful, sultry woman that LaDonna turns into in an evening gown and casting spells around some really brutish barbarian warriors. That's so much fun to play with that dynamic and that clash of cultures. I want to talk now about the evening dress. This is a good place to do it. I'm very aware that there was no evening dresses in the Middle Ages. I'm also very aware that this is my world, and I can do whatever I want. And I like evening dresses on women. And I think that it is a very empowering piece of clothing. And so a lot of my female characters wear evening dresses, and I don't care what people think of that. There are some people that say if you're going to write in a world that has a sword, then everything should be my lord, my lady. There should be no casual words like okay. There should be no anything anachronistic that takes you out of the time period. Well, I get to define the time period. I get to say and create any kind of anything that I want. Take anything from that world and put it into my world. Take anything from our world and put it into my world. Evening dresses is where I happen to do that. There are people that'll count marks off for that, that'll hate my books for that, that'll just close my books for that. And to those people I say, it's fantasy. If you don't like fantasy, don't read fantasy. Okay. So that's the main reason Horask has come to this village. He's come to this village to wipe out Thrak and Ithrin and LaDonna. And he wants to use them. He wants to take them and use them to destroy the world. But if he can't use them, he wants to kill them. Kai comes to protect those three people. In The Slave, his father, Taiga, pushes him into the Sour Eye, throwing him back into time. Before he does, he says, find the Terrican clan. They can help you. And he pushes him into, well, the Terrican clan, this little boy in the story I just read, he's the last remaining member of the Terrican clan, and they have the ability to see the future. So that is Kai going after the Terrican clan. In that scene, Kai is wearing a white robe when he actually goes to save the boy, and is cursed with the voice of a banshee. He is wearing a white robe. When you see him come into the village to save Ithrin, Thrak, and Ladana, he's wearing a black robe. And he does that after a certain act is committed. After he does a certain thing that he really regrets, he gets rid of the white robe and starts wearing the black as a way of punishing himself for what he's done. Okay, so then let's talk about the Reese Wasteland. We have seen the Reese Wasteland before. There's a book called Crisis of Fate. Crisis of Fate has a scene in it, the prologue, where a man named Bruta Corlin, Bruta is also in Onslaught of Madness, a man named Bruta Corlin is going to the Reese Wasteland to talk to and deal with and make a deal with this group, this coven that run this tower in this land. He goes to them, he gives them an object, he pays what he needs to pay, and they make a coin for him. And this coin is a death token. And he uses it to control an extremely dangerous man that is under his employment named Arundus. That all happens in Onslaught. By the end of Onslaught, another person has this coin, and it is found and used against Arundus in a struggle that these Arundus has with another character. That struggle is played out in Crisis. So the coin is created in the beginning of Crisis, it's used in Onslaught, and then finds its way into Crisis when Arundus has his final showdown with his nemesis. So Crisis, Onslaught, Crisis, with a jump in the timelines because of that. The prologue of Crisis actually takes place quite earlier than the onset of Onslaught. Onslaught, though, is a book released first in the story. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of jumping around, telling you the backstory behind, and all of that kind of stuff. From the moment he saves the last of the Terrican, from the moment he runs into the Witch of Dean, and he's cursed with the voice of a banshee, Kai has to do all of the fight, all of the silent war battles he has to do without speaking. So he writes things out and all this kind of stuff. He has to do it all without speaking. So that becomes a major problem for the story. So that's, I think that's, Hecatomb. If you read Legends of Paralesque, you're going to see two things. One, Legends of Paralesque has a small little bit of writing that introduces the book, in which the book Legends of Paralesque is being held by a person that has a spear going through their body. somebody finds that book and brings it to Simon Bard, and Simon reads the book to them. So that person, I'm not going to tell you who it is, but if you have read Plight and you have read Fate and you have read Crown, you'll be able to read the description of the person in the beginning of Parallax and know who it is that was killed with that spear and who was clutching onto this book. Anyway, in that book, there's a story of the creation of the world. And in the story, three gods get together to create the world. And the mightiest of them, the giant god of strength, his name is Hecaton. And he rips his legs off to create the matter in which he creates the world. So the world of Tamiya has been created by the legs of the god of the giants. So Hecaton becomes known as the god of sacrifice. At another point, he, in order to pay Simon Bard back for something that Simon has done, he pulls his eye out and he gives it to Simon. Simon, it shrinks down and becomes kind of like it looks like a wooden globe with leather flapping behind it, kind of like the nerve endings of an eyeball. He hides it, and with the eye of Hecaton, Simon binds himself to it, and he is able to see everything that has happened and everything that is happening anywhere in the world if he concentrates on it. He uses this power to tell stories to people that will help them do the things that need to be done. He tells heroes background stories, basically. The Eye of Hecaton is in the book Onslaught and Fate. So, he takes the eye out and gives it to Simon as a gift, again making a sacrifice of himself. So he becomes the god of sacrifice. And the first book that I write in the second act, there is another sacrifice that he makes to save a world. And it's very cool. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but Hecaton actually does make another sacrifice. And so you can hear the story of that in Legends of Parallax. There's a lot going on here. This is one of the easier of the Sour Eye stories to read and understand. But there is a lot going on here. Anyway, that's what I've got for you. I'm going to put together I'm gonna stop here, and I'm gonna record another thing, kind of letting you know where we are in the Bramble situation and where the struggles lie. Anyway, that's my show for today. Thank you very much, and yeah, that's the Banshee. Okay, the update I have for you this week for Bramble is interminable waiting. It feels like my life's been put on hold, as if I'm waiting to be told what I am. I've got a lot of friends who are preparing me for the worst. Almost everybody that I talk to is like, no matter what, this does not change what you have made yourself and what you have dug yourself out of through 19 years of therapy and the relationship you've built with your wife and the relationship I've built with all my friends. The entire world that I've created with my work. And of course they're right. If I find out that I'm Char's son instead of Bramble's son, nothing technically changes. I'm still the man that I created myself to be. But at the same time, it does change. Legacy changes. I can tell my sons they have a different grandfather. I can tell myself I have a different father. Different bloodline, different traits, different things handed down father to son, mother to daughter, father to daughter. Things that are in my blood. There are genetic traits you have that are just there because of who you're born from. I guess if I find out that I am Bramble's son, I have to start from a different zero. I have to start by saying I had these traits in my blood instead of these traits in my blood to start from when I built myself into what I am today. And there's a pride factor. There's a pride factor that comes with this. Pride in who and what I'm from, instead of shame every time I hear what used to be my last name. And I'm just waiting for that to kick in. When I sent it to Ancestry.com, they told me it would be between 6 to 8 weeks. But I know somebody else, Tacey, who sent hers in to Ancestry and to, what's it, 23andMe?
Yeah.
And to another site that does a similar thing called 23andMe. And she said that she never had to wait for longer than 3 to 4 weeks to get her answers. And she sent to Ancestry. Well, it's been 3 weeks. So maybe I'm going to hear about it now, and maybe I'm not going to hear about it for another 5 weeks. I don't know. And the waiting is insane, and it's always on my mind, and I need to get back to writing new content, and I can't concentrate on it, and I need to get back to finishing the books that I need to revise, and I can't concentrate on it, and I need to, the only thing I've been able to really maintain is practicing the bass and this show. Everything else is just kind of do what you can when you can. And I don't like living that way. I can say that I made dinner the last 3 times that we ate. And I see that as a big win. Yesterday, I spent 8 hours making burritos, and I made 78 burritos, froze them so that I can have them for snacks whenever I need to. But I made 78 burritos. So that took a lot of cooking and a lot of focus and a lot of waiting and a lot of stirring and a lot of timers and a lot of rolling. My wife rolled them all and I heated the tortillas, and it was just this whole thing, and I was able to get through all of that. Another thing I did was I filmed a meeting with another writer that will be on this show in a couple of weeks. I have to wait a couple of weeks because of, it's when they wanted me to release the video, and they had their reasons. So I filmed that. I am getting stuff done. I am sleeping. Constantly having really intense, very cryptic dreams that I have to pull apart. Last night I had a dream and it involved a promiscuous woman and me meeting family members I'd never met before in a land that I'd never been before. You know, stuff like that. Like, you can trace it all back. It all comes back. Every waking moment that I have, it all traces back to Bramble and the Bramble situation. Anyway, okay, I'm gonna get off here. I want to edit this video and put everything together on this video now, and have it done as soon as I can. And this video is not going to be easy to edit. So I have a bit of a bloopers reel I'm going to play at the end of this. But for the most part, this is it. This is the show. Thank you very much for watching. Do all the things. And I'll see you next week. Bye. Hold on. What's going on? A piece of paper is being shoved under the door. You have him now. Nothing can stop me from taking him.
Oh, they're here to tell you goodnight.
They're here to tell me goodnight. Come on. This
do.
is my youngest son, Tobin. Tobin, say hi.
Hi.
Say hi. They can't see your face. Say hi. This is my oldest son, Rafe. He's gonna be horrified by the fact that I make him say hi.
Yeah, hello.
Bye. Anyway.
I was drawing something, and we didn't want to interrupt your recording, so I was like, maybe if I just stick this through.
Okay. Well, I'm in the middle of a read, so you gotta take off. Close the door.
Have fun.
I'm gonna back up a bit. The Trimarians sent the singer to us. We know now that they fear our covenant and my order. Guy had nothing to say. He knew no pride, no reason to defend the bravery of his order. He shook his head. I came for the boy.